His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, and guests of honor, together with your delegation, Honorable Justice Ben Chikaya, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Her Excellency Ambassador Selma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, in virtual attendance, Honorable Zainab Athman Katimba, Deputy Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs, representing Honorable Dr. Juma Zuberi Homera, Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania, Honorable Justice Pascal Mamuni, President of the Court of Cassation of Burkina Faso, representing participating judiciaries, Honorable Lordships and Ladyship, Chief Justices of African Union Member States, Honorable Amos Makala, Regional Commissioner of Arusha, His Excellency Willy Nyamitwe, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Burundi to the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and Chairperson of the Permanent Representatives Committee of the African Union, Excellencies, members of the Permanent Representatives Committee to the African Union, Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners accredited to the United Republic of Tanzania, Honorable Lady Justice Shafika Ben-Saula, Vice President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Judges of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Judges of African Union Member States Jurisdiction, Mr. Hervé Poité, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, representatives to the African Union and United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Honorable Idrissa Sow, Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Sami Odom Sinama, Chairperson of the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, Excellencies, Heads of African Union organs and institutions, here present and in virtual attendance, Honorable President of International and Regional Courts and Administrative Tribunals, here present and in virtual attendance, distinguished members of Tanzania Civil, Police and Military Services, distinguished national focal points of the African Court from member states of the African Union, present and attending virtually, distinguished chairpersons and members of national human rights institutions of the AU member states, present and in virtual attendance, honorable registrars and deputy registrars of various jurisdictions, present and in virtual attendance, presidents and members of bar associations, present and in virtual attendance, distinguished counsel on the roster of the African Court and members of the legal profession, present and attending virtually, Ms. Sophia Eli, coordinator of the African Court Coalition, members of civil society, distinguished members of the academia, members of the media and press fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to you all. My name is Grace Wakio Kakai, Deputy Registrar of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, and I have the honor to serve as the Director of Program for this historic ceremony marking the opening of the 2026 Judicial Year of Report and commemoration of 20 years of service in protecting human and people's rights in Africa. On behalf of the African Court, I warmly welcome all our distinguished guests present, physically and virtually. Allow me to briefly outline the program for this solemn ceremony. Before that, I would like to inform you that there is interpretation in Arabic, English, French, Kiswahili, Portuguese, Spanish, and Tanzanian Sign Language. We shall begin with goodwill messages from distinguished representatives of member states, African Union organs, the judiciary, civil society, and international partners, reflecting the collaborative spirit that this has sustained the court for 20 years. We shall then listen to the address of the President of the Court, who will reflect on the journey of the Court over the past 2 decades. Thereafter, we will have the privilege of hearing the keynote address by our guest of honor, and the ceremony will culminate in the formal declaration of the opening of the 2026 Judicial Year, the official launch of commemoration of the 20th anniversary, and the launch of the Court's new website, symbolizing renewal, reflection, and forward vision. We will conclude with a vote of thanks by the Honorable Justice Shafika Ben-Saula, Vice President of the Court, followed by official photographs and light refreshments. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, and in the interest of time, which is short, we shall now receive goodwill messages from our distinguished partners and stakeholders. Each speaker will have 6 minutes, and they will come to the podium where I'm speaking from now. The goodwill message that will kick us off is from Honorable Zainab Asuman Katimba, MP, Deputy Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania, representing Honorable Dr. Juma Zuberi Omera, MP, Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania. You're welcome.
His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana and Guest of Honor, Honorable Judge Blaise Chikaya, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Lady Justice Bensula Chasika, Vice President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Mahmoud Thabit Kombo, Minister of Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation, Honorable Ministers present, Honorable Amos Gabriel Makala, Regional Commissioner of Arusha, representatives of the Judiciaries of the United Republic of Tanzania, representatives of the African Union institutions, Madam Grace Wakio Kakai, Deputy Registrar of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of civil society, members of the press, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I convey warm and fraternal greetings from Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, a steadfast advocate for justice, constitutionalism, and promotion and protection of human rights. I also extend a sincere welcome to all distinguished participants who have traveled from across our country and from different parts of our great continent to join us here in Arusha for this solemn occasion. Your presence here today reflects the high esteem in which you hold this honorable court and the collective commitment we share to advancing justice in Africa. Indeed, we say, Karibuni sana, meaning you're most welcome. I assure you that Tanzania's long-standing tradition of hospitality will embrace you. Karibuni sana to Tanzania, a land of peace, unity and harmony, and a proud host state of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. Honorable President, the United Republic of Tanzania considers it a profound privilege to host the African Court on Human and People's Rights. It is therefore a singular honor for me to deliver these goodwill remarks on behalf of the government of the United Republic of Tanzania. The African Court on Human and People's Rights has a noble mandate to ensure the protection of human and people's rights across our continent. This important journey began 20 years ago, and today Tanzania proudly joins the rest of Africa in congratulating the court in its 20th anniversary. As the host state, we can confidently affirm that these 2 decades have been marked by dedication, resilience, and unwavering commitment. They have been years of tireless effort driven by the determination to ensure that people of Africa have meaningful access to justice at both regional and international levels. The court has also made significant contributions to the enduring vision of African solutions to African problems by strengthening an adjudicatory system that bridges diverse legal traditions across the continent and advances justice for all. This has not been an easy task. Yet for 2 decades, the court has navigated complex legal, political, and institutional landscapes with prudence, integrity, and professionalism. Through its jurisprudence, it has progressively shaped continental human rights standards and reinforced the rule of law within member states. Honorable President, we are aware that in the discharge of its noble mandate, the African Court on Human and People's Rights has encountered some challenges. These include hesitancy among some states to accede to the court's jurisdiction, withdrawals of declarations made under Article 34, Sub-Article 6 of the Protocol establishing the court, and the non-implementation of certain judgments. Notwithstanding these challenges, the court has remained steadfast in its resolve and consistent in its jurisprudential development. Through perseverance, institutional maturity, and judicial independence, it has continued to strengthen the African human rights framework and uphold the principles enshrined in the African Charter. The strength of the African Court ultimately reflects our collective commitment to the rule of law, accountability, and human dignity. Honorable President, as the host state and an early supporter of the court's jurisdiction, the United Republic of Tanzania remains steadfast in its commitment to strengthening the African human rights system. Our engagement reflects not merely an obligation, but a firm conviction that justice, accountability, constitutionalism, and are indispensable pillars of sustainable peace and development across our continent. Tanzania's relationship with the African Court dates back to the court's establishment in 2006 and has since been characterized by sustained cooperation and mutual respect. As the court commemorates 2 decades of service, this milestone offers an opportunity to acknowledge Tanzania's engagement with the court's processes, which has contributed to the growth and refinement of its jurisprudence and to the broader development of continental human rights standards. In this regard, Tanzania has taken steps to implement certain decisions of the African Court, integrating aspects of its jurisprudence into domestic judicial practice and contributing to ongoing legal and institutional reforms. For example, the decision in Alex Thomas versus Tanzania, application number 5 of 2013, contributed to the development that culminated in the enactment of the Legal Aid Act, Chapter 21. Likewise, in Attorney General versus Dixon, Paulo Sanga of 2020, CZA-CA 371, the Court of Appeal drew on the principles articulated in Anaclet Paulo versus Tanzania, application number 16 of 2017, when assessing the legality of Section 148, subsection 5 of the Criminal Procedure Act, which concerns bail restrictions. As a member state, and in evidence of its continued cooperation, the United Republic of Tanzania remains engaged in constructive dialogue with the court on matters relating to access under Article 34, Sub-Article 6 of the Protocol. This dialogue reflects our commitment to ensuring that the African human rights system continues to evolve in ways that strengthen mutual confidence, institutional effectiveness, and the collective aspiration for justice and accountability. Honorable President, as we look ahead to the next 2 decades, engagement with all key stakeholders must be strengthened. This includes member states, African Union organs, legal practitioners, academia, civil society, the media, and the wider public. Enhanced awareness of the court's mandate, jurisprudence, and contributions will foster greater public confidence, cooperation, and support. Honorable President, the commemoration of this milestone under the theme 20 years of service in protecting human and people's rights in Africa offers a timely opportunity to reflect on the court's journey, celebrate its milestones, and draw lessons to inform its future decisions. Honorable President, as this court marks this important milestone, may the coming decades further consolidate its noble mandate as a steadfast guardian of human rights, human and people's rights, and as an enduring beacon of African justice, dignity, and moral authority. The United Republic of Tanzania commends the African Court on Human and People's Rights for its dedicated efforts to promote and protect human rights and for its pivotal role in the African human rights system. In closing, I welcome our distinguished guests once again. Should time permit, we invite you to experience Tanzania's northern natural heritage from the Serengeti and Ngorongoro to Arusha National Park to the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro and exquisite Zanzibar. Asanteni sana na karibuni tena.
Thank you, the Honorable Deputy Minister. We shall now hear from a statement from Ms. Sophia Eddy, Coordinator, African Court Coalition, who will be represented by Ms. Anita Cherubi. While she walks to the podium, I would like to correct the protocol list. Honorable Amos Makala, Regional Commissioner of Arusha, is represented here by Dr. Jacob Julius Rombo, the District Administrative Secretary of Arusha. We would also like to recognize the presence of Her Excellency Veronica Nduva, the Secretary General of the East African Community. Ms. Cherubi, you're welcome.
Thank you. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Judge, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Justice Blaise Chikaya, Her Excellency Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Honorable Zainab Athumani Katimba, Deputy Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania, Honorable Judges of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Ministers in attendance, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the African Court Coalition, it is an honor to deliver this Goodwill message at the opening of this judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, as the court marks its 20th anniversary. 20 years is indeed significant. It's an institutional milestone. It represents both longevity as well as clarified human rights standards under the African Charter and other relevant human rights instruments. Since its establishment under the 1998 Ouagadougou Protocol, the court has evolved from a normative aspiration into a functioning continental judicial organ with a defined jurisprudential identity. The African Court Coalition has, since its establishment in 2003, worked to support the court's mandate through advocacy, strategic engagement, capacity building, and awareness creation, among others. We have consistently affirmed three particular things. One, access to the court for individuals and non-government organizations is the most crucial pillar of the court. The status of Article 34.6 declarations thus remains a decisive factor in this regard. Renewed political will by member states to accept direct access would significantly enhance the court's protective mandate and reinforce public confidence in continental adjudication. Second, to ensure justice for victims of human and people's rights and human rights violations, decisions of the court must be complied with. The coalition, therefore, recognizes that implementation is a central frontier in the dispensation of justice. Your Excellency, honorable judges, third, in our mission to mobilize and coordinate the diverse stakeholders of the African courts to support building an institutionally strong, accessible, and independent court, the coalition convened last week from the 26th to the 28th of February its second stakeholders platform in the celebration of the 20 years of the African court by reflecting on achievements, confronting the challenges, and charting the future for the African court. Among the key recommendations from our convening last week, it is that for the next phase of the court's evolution, stronger implementation mechanisms, enhanced engagement with states, and structured dialogue with executive branches and other stakeholders will be essential to ensure that the African court's decisions translate into concrete improvements in people's lives. The visibility and public trust of the African courts operates in an ecosystem of perception. Therefore, increased engagement with the media, with the civil society organizations, academic institutions, and national bar associations can demystify procedures and promote understanding of the court's mandate. A well-informed public is more likely to view the courts as relevant to resolving their struggles and therefore transformative and a beacon to human rights in the continent. The court's readiness and its procedural efficiency in determining and adjudicating emerging frontiers in the evolving complex areas of artificial intelligence and digital technology, climate and environmental justice, and business and human rights. As conversations continue around these frontiers and their profound impact on human rights, it is vital that the African court is well prepared structurally and procedurally to keep pace with its evolving needs that are within the court's broader mandate. Your Excellency, honorable judges and distinguished guests, anniversaries are moments to honor leadership. We therefore acknowledge the vision of the founding architects of the African Union and the African Court on Human and People's Rights, the dedicated current and former judges of the court, the cooperation of states in compliance with the court's decisions. We also recognize the courage of litigants who strive to engage with the court in the efforts to protect human and people's rights of African citizens, often in complex political environments. For the African Court Coalition, this 20th anniversary is a reaffirmation of partnership. We remain committed to constructive engagement with the court and with all stakeholders, including states, civil society, national human rights institutions, and bar associations, as well as academia and media, to strengthen implementation of decisions of the court, increase ratifications and declarations, and cultivate a culture of human rights protection and promotion. As the court enters its third decade, the task for us all is clear: to deepen its jurisprudential impact and enhance its accessibility and visibility. In doing so, the African Court will not only adjudicate disputes, it will continue to shape the normative trajectory of human rights protection across the continent. On behalf of the African Court Coalition, I extend our congratulations on this 20-year milestone and our best wishes for a productive and impactful judicial year. Thank you.
Thank you to the coalition. I now welcome Mr. Hervé Kouate, the UNHCR representative to the AU and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana and guest of honor, together with your delegation, Honorable Juge Blaise Chikaya, Président de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, en vous félicitant pour votre brillante élection. Son Excellence l'ambassadeur Selma Malika Haddadi, vice-présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, présente en mode virtuel. Honorable Zainab Atouman Katimba, Deputy Minister of Constitutional Affairs, representing Honorable Dr. Juma Zuberi Homera, Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania. Son Excellence Willy Nyamitwe, ambassadeur extraordinaire et plénipotentiaire de la République du Burundi auprès de la République fédérale démocratique d'Éthiopie, représentant permanent du Burundi auprès de l'Union africaine et président du comité des représentants permanents de l'Union africaine. Excellencies, members of Parliament of the Permanent Representative Committee of the African Union, and protecting the rights and freedoms enshrined in the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. Over these years, the court has helped strengthen foundations of justice, dignity, and the rule of law across the continent. This anniversary offers an important opportunity to reflect on the court's achievements. Through landmark judgments and advice, the court has qualified to the asylum seekers, stateless persons, and internally displaced persons. The court's contribution to 20 years in terms of its importance. Its jurisprudence strengthened the legal architecture protecting vulnerable individuals, and reinforced a fundamental
procedures, language obstacles, discriminatory practices. These procedures are bigger and enforceable across Africa. Mid-2025, Eastern and Southern
legal aid systems, active civil society engagement, and enhanced cooperation among continental mechanisms. Above all, it requires the full and faithful implementation of these policies so that this important work translates into tangible change in the lives of women, men, and children across Africa. UNHCR has a long history of judicial engagement and supporting both regional and national judiciaries. UNHCR has a memorandum of understanding with the ECOWAS Court of Justice and with the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. UNHCR acts as amicus curiae, or friend of the court, around the world as part of its supervisory mandate toward the 1951 Refugee Convention. The office also provides training and expert opinion on specific legal issues regarding the implementation of the 1951 Refugee Convention and on the 1969 OAU Refugee Convention. Binding on the above, UNHCR would be delighted to work with the court, with this court, toward the signature of a memorandum of understanding enable us to deepen our partnership and strengthen the work our two institutions do toward our shared objectives. We would also encourage all African Union member states that have not yet done so to accept the court's jurisdiction under Article 34 of the protocol. Mr. President, Excellencies, Your Honors, distinguished guests, this anniversary is a reaffirmation of our shared commitment to the values of the African Charter and to the principles that every person, regardless of status or nationality, deserves equal protection under the law. I thank you very much.
Thank you for that statement. Next, we will hear from Honorable Justice Pascal Bamuni, President of the Court of Cassation, Burkina Faso, representing the participating judiciaries.
Merci, Madame la modératrice.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Message of support on behalf of national courts. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, and guest of honor and of your delegation, Honorable Justice Blaise Chikaya, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Your Excellency Ambassador Selma Malika Adadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, present online, Mrs. Zainab Athuman Katimba, Deputy Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs, representing Dr. Juma Zuberi Omera, Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania. All protocols observed. It is with a deep sense of honor and sincere emotion that I speak before this assembly on behalf of the national courts that I represent on the occasion of the official opening ceremony of your judicial year under the theme 20 years of service in protecting human and people's rights. Please allow me to begin by extending to the President, the Honorable Judge Blaise Chikaya, and to all judges of the African Court, the most heartfelt congratulations from national courts. Mr. President, you were recently elected to the helm of the court, and I wish you great success in accomplishing this noble task. The theme of this judicial year, which commemorates the 20 years of the court's existence, warrants a stock-taking, a review of the past, highlighting the successes as well as the shortcomings in order to better plan for the future. For 20 years now, your court has, with consistency and sometimes in the face of adversity, flown and upheld the precious flag of fundamental rights on our continent. As national judges, we fully appreciate how far we have come. The African Court is not a distant and abstract institution. For us, it is the watchdog of the African Charter. It is the mirror in which we must look to assess our conduct and the human rights situation.
D'une part, elle incarne l'ultime recours lorsque les voies de droit internes sont épuisées, que nos décisions, parfois imparfaites, laissent injusticiables sur le bord du chemin de la justice. La Cour africaine est ce phare qui lui tend la main. Elle nous rappelle, à nous juges nationaux, que notre mission première est d'être les premiers protecteurs des droits et libertés, car la subsidiarité n'est pas un privilège, mais une responsabilité exigeante. D'autre part,
A responsibility, or daunting responsibility. On the other hand, and this is perhaps his most decisive contribution to us, the court is a jurisprudential compass. Its judgments do more than simply settle disputes. They interpret, clarify, and bring the African Charter to life. It engages in dialogue with us through its decisions, offering us keys to resolving complex legal issues that arise in our courtrooms. From the fight against torture to freedom of expression, indigenous peoples' rights, and gender equality, its rulings feed our reflection and raise our standards of protection. This dialogue between judges, this exchange of legal ideas, is the bedrock of a community of law, and the African Court is without any doubt its main driving force. On behalf of all the national courts represented here, I would like to reaffirm our unwavering commitment to this institution. For national courts, the jurisprudence of the court is an invaluable source that enables them to make comparative case law analysis when applying national laws in their decisions. For example, national courts in countries such as Kenya, South Africa, and the Gambia cite the court's case law in their decisions. It is also important to note the pivotal role played by national courts in implementing the decisions of the African Court. I can mention here the example I know best, that of my country, Burkina Faso. On 2 occasions, the court has condemned the state of Burkina Faso in 2 judgments concerning the freedom of journalists. These are the cases of Nobel Zenko and his fellow journalists versus the state of Burkina Faso, and of Lowe Issa Konate versus Burkina Faso, case 014 of 2013. These 2 decisions, which ruled against the state of Burkina Faso, have been fully implemented by the government with the support of national courts. The collaboration between the African Court and national courts is also evident in the regular judicial dialogue of the African Union, organized every 2 years by the court. I am convinced that regular consultations between the court and national courts will help to find solutions to the challenges bedeviling the courts, such as the ratification of the protocol. The submission of the Declaration Article 36(4) of the protocol and the implementation of the decisions of the court. On this note, I'd like to wish resounding success to the opening ceremony of the judicial year of the court and to all activities concerning the celebration of the 20th anniversary. Thank you for your kind attention. Done in Arusha, 2nd March 2026.
Thank you. I would like to specifically recognize the presence of the Honorable Mahmoud Albit Kombo, the Minister of Foreign and East Affairs and East African Cooperation of the United Republic of Tanzania. Though for this ceremony, he's part of the delegation from our guest of honor, but that special recognition is due him. The next statement is from Honorable Idrissa Sow, Chairperson, African Commission on Human and People's Rights, who is representing the African Union human rights organs. We like to think that the Commission is the mother organ for the human rights organs because it was established before the African Court and before the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, and other AU human rights organs. He will be appearing virtually and issuing his statement virtually. You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la modératrice.
Madam Moderator, Honorable Excellency John Dramani, President of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Blaise Chikaya, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Zainab Atuman Katiba, Deputy Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania, Excellency Willie Nyamitwe, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Burundi to the African Union and representing the PRC, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, with all due respect. It is a great honor for me to stand before this august assembly to deliver a message on behalf of the African Court on Human and People's Rights and all the organs of the African Union Human Rights to present this message of solidarity and to compliment the court during the official opening of the Judicial Year 2026. Allow me to congratulate the Honorable Judge Blaise Chikaya for his election as President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. Honorable President, I wish you every success in your new role and hope that together we will continue to strengthen the excellent collaboration and complementarity that bind our two institutions and the various organs of the African Union on Human Rights as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the official opening of the judicial year is of particular symbolic importance for the court, as it also marks the launch of the commemoration of its 20th anniversary. Let me, therefore, congratulate you, honorable judges and staff members, on this jubilee and on the progress already made over the past few years. 20 years of judicial practice undoubtedly constitute a historic milestone in the consolidation of the African architecture for the protection of human rights. Despite the many challenges and operational constraints it faces, the court has, with determination and perseverance, built up a rich body of case law through the hundreds of judgments and advisory opinions it has delivered in the many cases brought before it, thereby enriching the African legal corpus. These progress deserve to be strongly commended as they testify to the resilience and commitment of this High Court to serving the cause of human rights in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, since the African Court became operational, the Commission has pursued, in accordance with its own powers, a growing institutional dialogue with it, with a view to the effective protection of human rights in Africa. Indeed, the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, establishing the African Court, expressly enshrines the principle of complementarity between our two institutions. It is true that this complementarity has not always been fully reflected in practice. However, far from being a mere legal principle, the common experience gained over time has shown that this principle must be at the heart of the quest for effectiveness in the African human rights protection system. Collaboration between our two bodies is therefore of decisive importance in several respects. On the one hand, in the best interests of the individuals and peoples of our continent, it must facilitate victims' access to regional justice by allowing situations of human rights violations to be brought before either of the two bodies after domestic remedies have been exhausted in accordance with the will of the community legislator. And it must enable us to strengthen the consistency of the interpretations of the African Charter through constant jurisprudential dialogue between our two entities. I am convinced that far from being reduced to a simple collaboration between regional human rights bodies, the complementarity between the Court and the Commission must be a guiding principle for the joint action of our two institutions. These, at least, are the conclusions reached by the Commission and the courts through the ongoing work carried out in recent years. In this regard, I am pleased to announce that practical guidelines on the criteria for referral to the African Court and referral of cases from the court to the Commission have recently been adopted to strengthen the complementarity mechanism and will be fully mobilized for better protection of rights. This desire to go further in strengthening complementarity is also evident in the Commission's ongoing advocacy during its promotional missions to state parties for the ratification of the protocol establishing the court and the invitation to make the declaration provided for in Article 34(6). In this spirit, I would like to respectfully invite the state parties to the African Charter to continue their efforts to make human rights a genuine national and regional priority. Moreover, it is our conviction that the credibility of a human rights protection system is measured not only by the quality of the jurisprudence of the judicial and quasi-judicial bodies established, but also by the degree to which their decisions are enforced. Today, the low rate of enforcement of the decisions of our institutions is one of the most daunting challenges facing our respective bodies. Yet, as everyone knows, a court decision that is not enforced undermines the authority of the law, the confidence of those subject to it, and the ideal of a rule of law based on accountability. Enforcement cannot therefore be seen as a mere option left to the discretion of those responsible for making decisions, but rather as a binding legal obligation arising from international commitments freely entered into by state. It follows from this observation that strengthening the mechanisms for enforcing decisions is inevitably the next frontier in the maturity of our continental system. Faced with this challenge, the Commission reaffirms its willingness to strengthen institutional cooperation with the Court in monitoring enforcement, in particular through structured dialogue with states. Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to affirm that the coming years should be marked by increase ever stronger regional justice, increased cooperation between our two institutions, and a more united Africa assertive in its fundamental values of dignity, freedom, and justice. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Chairperson. Now we will listen to His Excellency Willy Nyamitwe, Ambassador of the Republic of Burundi to the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the African Union, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and the Chairperson of the Permanent Representatives Committee of the African Union. You're welcome, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, and guest of honor, together with your delegation. Your Excellency Mahmoud Thabit Kombo, Minister of Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation of the United Republic of Tanzania. Honorable Justice Blaise Chikaya, President of the African Court on Human and...
Allow me to recognize also Your Excellency Veronique Nduva, Secretary General of the EAC, Honorable Justice Pascal Bamouni, President of the Court of Cassation of Burkina Faso, representing participating judiciaries, Honorable Lordships and Ladyships, Chief Justices of African Union Member States, Honorable CPA Amos Makala, Regional Commissioner of Arusha, Excellencies, members of the Permanent Representatives Committee to the African Union here present, and those in virtual attendance, Honorable Lady Justice Shafika Ben Saula, Vice President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Judges of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Judges of African Union Member States jurisdictions, Mr. Hervé Kouate, UNHCR representative to the African Union and UNECA, Honorable Idrissa Sow, Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Excellencies, Heads of Organs and Institutions of the African Union, Honorable Presidents of international and regional courts and administrative tribunals, distinguished members of Tanzania Civil, Police and Military Services, distinguished national focal points of the African Court from member states of the African Union, distinguished chairpersons and members of national human rights institutions of member states of the African Union, honorable registrars and deputy registrars of various jurisdictions, presidents and members of bar associations, distinguished counsel on the roster of the African Court and members of the legal profession, Ms. Sophia Ebi, coordinator of the African Court Coalition, members of civil society, distinguished members of the academia, members of the media and press fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It's with profound honor that I address this distinguished gathering on behalf of the Permanent Representatives Committee, PRC, of the African Union on the occasion of the opening of the judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, a moment made even more significant as we commemorate the Court's 20th anniversary. I wish in this regard to commend the authorities of the United Republic of Tanzania for their warm hospitality and the excellent arrangements made for this important occasion. We are privileged to be honored by the presence of our distinguished guest of honor and keynote speaker, Your Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana. Allow me to join my voice to those who warmly welcomed you and say, Karibu sana, Akwaba. Excellency, your presence here today elevates this ceremony. We recognize and deeply appreciate your consistent support for the African Union and its institutions. Your commitment strengthens our collective resolve, particularly in advancing the Union's vital initiative to deliver justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations for the historical injustices of slavery and colonialism. Your voice in this case is a beacon for the continent, and we are grateful for your leadership, Excellency. Your Excellencies, honorable justices, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we convene at a very challenging time. It will be remiss in me, as chairperson of the PRC, to address this very important human rights gathering followed across the continent and beyond without reflecting on the evolving global order and its potential implications for human rights. One thing is clear. The post-World War II is undergoing a profound transformation, marked by a surge in conflicts across multiple regions, deepening geopolitical rivalries, and a growing strain on the effectiveness and credibility of multilateral institutions. From escalating crises in the Middle East to protracted conflicts elsewhere, these developments are exposing the fragility of international legal frameworks and raising serious concerns about the consistency in the application of human rights norms. The scale of human suffering and the challenges in securing coordinated global responses underscore a shifting landscape with far-reaching implications for the protection and promotion of human rights worldwide. In this evolving international order, Africa must respond not with fragmentation, but with cohesion. The African experience, anchored in solidarity, equality, and the indivisibility and interdependence of rights, positions the continent to contribute meaningfully to the global human rights discourse. As global power dynamics continue to shift, continental institutions must play a central role in safeguarding normative stability and reinforce legal certainty in times of uncertainty. In this regard, the African Court on Human and People's Rights, as the continent's human rights judicial body, becomes even more vital. It must move strategically to anchor our continent within a rules-based system grounded in African values, demonstrate that human rights protection is not externally imposed, but internally affirmed, and develop a robust jurisprudence and strengthens Africa's voice within the global legal discourse. Your Excellencies, Honorable Justices, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, notwithstanding the prevailing challenges in the international order, as we stand at the threshold of this new judicial calendar, we do so with a profound sense of purpose. We are not only opening the new judicial year, but also preparing to commemorate a historic milestone, the 20th anniversary of the operationalization of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. 20 years ago, our continent took a bold and visionary step by operationalizing a judicial body mandated to safeguard the rights and freedoms enshrined in the African Charter and related instruments. Over the past 2 decades, the court has steadily developed a body of jurisprudence that has clarified normative standards and strengthened accountability. This 20th anniversary is not merely a ceremonial milestone. It offers a timely opportunity to reflect on the court's evolution, its achievements, and the lessons learned, while renewing our collective commitment to its role as a pillar of justice within the African human rights system. Its mandate remains closely aligned with the aspirations of Agenda 2063, our shared vision of the Africa we want, particularly Aspiration 3, which calls for an Africa governed by democratic values, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. Over the past 2 decades, the court's jurisprudence has made a meaningful contribution to this vision by strengthening, enhancing the protection of vulnerable groups, and reinforcing the accountability of public authorities. We commend you. Your Excellencies, Honorable Justices, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are equally mindful that this anniversary coincides with ongoing institutional reform processes concerning the court. Reform presents an important opportunity to consolidate the gains of the past 2 decades while addressing emerging challenges. Our objective is clear. This reform must improve the court's capacity to discharge its mandate effectively and to strengthen human rights protection across the continent. The court must be equipped structurally and administratively to respond to a growing and increasingly complex case load. At the same time, institutional reform must be accompanied by tangible support from member states. The effectiveness of the court depends not only on its jurisprudence, but also on the adequacy of its human and financial resources. We therefore call upon all member states to ensure predictable and sustainable funding for the court. Looking ahead, we are planning to convene a retreat between the PRC and the court, which will provide a valuable platform for in-depth exchanges on the critical issues that I have highlighted. I am also pleased to outline the key commitments of the PRC Subcommittee on Human Rights, Democracy and Governance, which I have the honor to chair, in line with the decisions of the policy organs adopted at the recently concluded African Union Summit, and building on the recommendations of the subcommittee. We will institute regular compliance review sessions. These sessions will focus on the systematic monitoring of the implementation of decisions by concerned member states, as well as on addressing the challenges encountered in that process. In this regard, we will actively encourage member states to convene national dialogue platforms aimed at fostering consensus and identifying practical pathways for the effective implementation of these decisions. The role of national focal points for the court, already designated by a number of member states, will be central to this process. We therefore call upon all member states that have not yet done so to designate their focal persons without delay. We also look forward with great interest to the findings of the forthcoming in-depth study on the implementation of decisions by African Union human rights bodies, which will provide valuable data to further inform and strengthen our work. Furthermore, we note that the proposed framework for monitoring the implementation of the court's decisions remains under consideration by the Sectoral Technical Council on Justice and Legal Affairs. Once finalized, this framework will significantly enhance our collective efforts in this area. Finally, we call upon all member states and relevant stakeholders to work closely with the African Court in commemorating its 20th anniversary, thereby enhancing its visibility and bringing it closer to the people it is mandated to serve. Your Excellencies, Honorable Justices, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Court must also look to the future with ambition and clarity of purpose. The next phase of the Court's journey should be marked by an expanded, rich, and deeper, more tangible impact on the lives of African peoples. It is our shared aspiration that more Africans across all regions of our continent and irrespective of language or socioeconomic circumstance should be able to access justice before the court. On behalf of the Permanent Representatives Committee, I reaffirm our unwavering support for the African Court on Human and People's Rights as it opens this new judicial year and steps with confidence into this next decade of service. As an African proverb wisely reminds us, if you think you are too small to make a difference, try spending a night with a mosquito. This enduring wisdom calls upon each of us, member states, institutions, partners, and citizens alike to act with purpose and responsibility in advancing justice on our continent. May the years ahead be defined by deeper cooperation, greater efficiency, and a renewed collective commitment to uphold the dignity, rights, and aspirations of the African peoples. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. The last statement before we hear from the President of the Court is through a video message, pre-recorded video message by Her Excellency Ambassador Selma Malika Hadari, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. I hope the technical team is ready with that.
Your Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Your Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Justice Blaise Chikaya, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Mahmoud Tabit Kombo, Minister of Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Mahmoud Tabit Kombo, Minister of Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation of the United Republic of Tanzania, Honorable Judges of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Your Lordships and Your Ladyships, Chief Justices of African Union Member States and Presidents of Regional Human Rights Courts and Judges of National and Regional Courts, Honorable Attorneys and Solicitors Generals of African Union Member States, Your Excellency Ambassador Willie Nyamitwe, Chairperson of the Permanent Representatives Committee of the African Union, Your Excellencies Ambassadors, Your Excellencies Heads and Members of African Union organs, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed. Good morning to everyone. I am honored to address this august gathering on this Ali Yusuf, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and on my own behalf, I extend warm greetings from the African Union Commission and our full solidarity to the African Court as the continental human rights judicial organ of the African Union. The African Union Commission expresses its deep appreciation to Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, as the host state of the African Court in Arusha. Through its continued cooperation under the host agreement, Tanzania has provided the enabling environment that allows the court to discharge its continental mandate with independence and dignity. This enduring partnership reflects Tanzania's long-standing commitment to Pan-Africanism and the strengthening of multilateral institutions on African soil. let me recognize and appreciate the commitment of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, the President of the Republic of Ghana, for gracing this solemn ceremony as guest of honor. His Excellency's consistent support to the African Union and its institutions continues to enrich our collective resolve, particularly in the African Union's initiative on justice for African and people of African descent through reparations. This year is not merely a marker on the calendar. It is a historic milestone. As the court opens the 2026 judicial year, it also commences the activities for the commemoration of the court's 20th anniversary since its operationalization in 2006. 20 years of giving life to the noble responsibility bestowed upon it by African Union member states to protect and fulfill human rights as guaranteed under the African Charter on Women and People's Rights and other human rights instruments. 20 years of transforming the promise of justice into reality through binding decisions that foster the enjoyment of human rights by the people of Africa. Your Excellency, Honorable Justices, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I address the court, the guests of honor, and its distinguished guests on this memorable occasion, I find it of critical importance to say that for the African Union Commission, the court is not a distant institution. It is a vital organ that gives practical effect to the core principles enshrined in the Constitutive Act of the African Union on the respect for human and people's rights. The court is the judicial conscience of our union. The court plays a central role in strengthening the union's commitment to human rights and the rule of law. By fleshing out the commitment of African states through decisions and shaping remedies for victims, the African court builds from the African one as the driving force of the African Union. Your Excellencies, Honorable Justices, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as has consistently been stated and practiced over the years, the court's work is inextricably linked to the realization of Agenda 2063, our continent's master plan for transformative development. The African one cannot be built on the foundation of injustice and disregard of the rule of law. The court's jurisprudence directly fuels this vision, and I wish to point to a few illustrations in this regard. One, by adjudicating on issues relating to fair trial and democratic governance, the African court is trusting to acceleration on good governance and the rule of law. Second, by providing a judicial forum to address serious and massive violations for a peaceful and secure Africa, directly contributing to the peaceful resolution of conflict. Third, by upholding the rights of communities like the Ojek in Kenya, the court affirms Aspiration 5 and 6, providing that development must be people-driven and that our shared values include accountability. The Commission, through all its 64 departments, works to translate policy into action. The court, through its judgment, provides a legal backing for that action. When the court speaks, it strengthens the hands of the Commission in promoting continental legal integration and in positioning Africa as a strong, united, and influential role player in line with Aspiration 7. Your Excellencies, Honorable Justices, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that, in light of its unprecedented contribution to advancing justice and the rule of law, as needs to count the African Court as a key partner and leading institutional player in the 20 years to come. The journey of the court over the past 2 decades has been one of steady progress, but also of significant challenge. This is precisely why the African Union Commission is the useful bridge between this judicial body and the political will of member states. The Commission and the Secretariat of the African Union Policy Organ serve as an essential link between this court and member states. We are therefore closely engaged with the ongoing institutional reform of the African Union, which naturally touches upon the work of the court. Let me be clear, we do not view reform as an abstract exercise. For us, it is a means to a vital end, an efficient, effective, and accessible court for every African. I take this opportunity to emphasize that any reform measures relating to the court are guided by the principles of judicial independence, worthy of a continental court, pathway for the implementation of decisions at the national level. The Commission is committed to working with the court and the member states to do these essential pillars. Finally, allow me to expand on one more reason why it remains relevant today than it has been in the past 2 decades. And this is because the past to reparations as deeply African quest cannot be worked without an effective continental justice system nor without a strengthened cooperation and dialogue with Africa's partners. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this 20th anniversary of the court is not only a moment to look back at our journey, but also to look forward and align ourselves with the defining moral imperatives of our time. We meet at the dawn of the decade of the Union for Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations, a period in which the call for reparatory justice has moved from the margins to the mainstream of continental discourse. In this regard, it is so apt that the African Union champion of this court, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, is the guest of honor for this solemn ceremony. Furthermore, the African court assumes a role of historic significance. The court is not merely an adjudicator of contemporary disputes. It is a custodian of memory and a crucible for legal innovation. As we move from advocacy to action, the question before us is clear. How do we translate the moral argument for reparations into enforceable legal rights? I'm pleased to recall to this gathering that the African Union Commission, under the stewardship of His Excellency President Mahama, is committed to working with experts and member states to develop robust legal strategies in this regard. As continental discussions on reparatory justice evolve, the African Court's law and practice on reparations will no doubt induce the legal discourse on accountability and justice. In this context, it is fitting that this commemoration coincides with the new continental reflection on justice, past, present, and future. As we look to the future, we must ask ourselves the hard question: how can the court adapt to ensure which remains accessible to the most vulnerable. How can we, as the African Union Commission and Member States, strengthen our collaboration to ensure its judgments are fully transformative and truly transformative? Let us use this 20th anniversary milestone not just for celebration, but for introspection and a renewed commitment. The African Union Commission pledges its unwavering support to the African Court. We will continue to work with the African Union policy organs and all stakeholders to ensure that this beacon of justice shines brighter, guiding us all towards an Africa where human and people's rights are protected, where the rule of law prevails, and where the promise of the Africa we want becomes a reality for all its people. Congratulations to the African Court on this historic milestone, and I would like to thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. You will all agree that after the statement to read briefly collected from the back just for a minute or two while we prepare to listen to the speech of the President of the Court. The back can energize us a little bit so that we can be invigorated and ready to listen to the President of the Court and the guest of our speech. Just a minute or two. And thank you for listening. Retired President of the African Court of Human and People's Rights, to deliver the speech on the 2026 judicial year and the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the court.
John, I said there's another one on the podium, so I should take it.
No, leave that one is on the podium, then it's okay. Tell you that it's okay, because this one, I have to fix it.
Des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Honorable Kwame Dramani, président de l'organe de l'Union africaine pour la lutte contre la corruption, et je ne manquerai pas de faire un salut fraternel aux juges et aux personnalités des deux autres cours mondiales des droits de l'homme. Donc, félicitations pour être avec nous aujourd'hui à Arusha. Excellences, mesdames et messieurs les ambassadeurs et hauts commissaires accrédités auprès de la République unie de Tanzanie, messieurs et mesdames les chefs et représentants des institutions internationales régionales, distingués points focaux nationaux désignés pour la Cour, mesdames et messieurs le président et membres des barreaux, mesdames et messieurs le président et membres des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme, chers partenaires issus de la société civile et du monde universitaire, ici présents, chers membres de la presse, mesdames et messieurs, tout protocole dûment observé. C'est avec un profond honneur et humilité et un sens aigu de la responsabilité institutionnelle que je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la cérémonie marquant la rentrée judiciaire 2026 de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, et au lancement de la commémoration du 20e anniversaire de la Cour. Pour commencer, permettez-moi tout d'abord d'exprimer la profonde gratitude de la Cour à son Excellence Samia Suluhu Hassan, présidente de la République unie de Tanzanie, ainsi qu'au gouvernement et au peuple tanzanien pour leur soutien indéfectible qui a été rappelé ici dans les discussions que nous avons vues en tant qu'État hôte de la Cour. Depuis que ce Darfour a été établi à Arusha, la Tanzanie a non seulement fourni des locaux, assuré la sécurité et facilité la logistique, et a offert un environnement stable et respectueux et garanti l'indépendance judiciaire. Nous sommes par ailleurs particulièrement honorés de la présence bienveillante de son Excellence John Dramani Mahama, président de la République du Ghana, qui a accepté d'être l'invité d'honneur de cette cérémonie historique. Excellence, votre présence aujourd'hui confirme au plus haut point votre engagement politique et l'indépendance que les États membres accordent à la justice continentale et à l'État de droit. En nous honorant de votre présence à cette occasion, vous conférez un poids diplomatique et moral au travail d'Afrique et au système africain des droits de l'homme dans son ensemble. Au nom des 11 juges d'Arusha, je vous adresse nos sincères remerciements. Excellence, chers collègues, distingués invités, mesdames et messieurs, je dirais quelques mots sur les fondements et le mandat de la Cour africaine. La Cour a été créée conformément à l'article 1er du protocole relatif à la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples portant création d'une Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. La Cour a compétence pour interpréter et appliquer la Charte et tout autres instruments internationaux pertinents relatifs aux droits de l'homme, les instruments du monde ratifiés par les États. Au cours des 2 dernières décennies, la Cour a fait preuve de résilience, de cohérence et de maturité jurisprudentielle. Ce qui était autrefois perçu comme provisoire s'est révélé solidement ancré dans les droits et sous-tendu par un engagement institutionnel réel. Excellence, chers collègues, distingués invités, mesdames et messieurs, au mois de janvier 2006, la Cour avait reçu au total 337 requêtes dans le cadre de procédures contentieuses et 17 requêtes dans le cadre de procédures consultatives, portant à 390 le nombre total de requêtes qui s'est détaillé comme suit. 334 requêtes ont été reçues dans le cadre de procédures contentieuses normales, dont 259 ont été tranchées et 105 toujours pendues. 9 requêtes en révision d'arrêt ont été reçues et toutes ont été tranchées. 6 requêtes en interprétation de l'arrêt ont été tranchées et 17 demandes d'avis consultatifs ont été déposées, dont 2 sont toujours pendantes devant la Cour. En 20 ans, la Cour a développé une jurisprudence qui ne cesse de croître et qui clarifie la portée des obligations des États en vertu des instruments internationaux pertinents et surtout la Charte et des instruments connexes. Sans revenir de manière détaillée sur chaque affaire, la Cour a notamment contribué de façon manifeste dans 7 domaines principaux. Nos garanties d'un droit à la justice équitable, la participation des citoyens africains à la vie électorale de leur pays, conformément à l'article 13 de la Charte, la liberté d'expression, la Cour a publié notamment sur l'association, la liberté d'association et la liberté de réunion. La Cour a contribué également à la protection des communautés vulnérables et à la non-marginalisation de certaines communautés africaines. La Cour a contribué par sa jurisprudence aux droits des femmes et des filles. La Cour a renforcé les principes relatifs aux réparations conformément à l'article 27 de la Charte. Ainsi donc, Excellence, chers collègues, distingués invités, mesdames et messieurs, le système africain des droits de l'homme fonctionne comme une architecture intégrée et synergique. À côté de la Cour, comme nous le savons, il y a la Commission africaine, qui en a été question tout à l'heure, la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, qui a été créée en vertu de l'article 30 de la Charte. Il y a le comité africain d'experts et des droits de l'enfant. Il y a le Parlement panafricain qui favorise l'harmonisation législative et la responsabilité démocratique, renforçant ici la transparence dans les dispositifs nationaux de l'ordre occidental et tels que formulés dans la charte et les instruments pertinents du cadre du continent africain, et également un quatrième organe que l'on pourrait citer, c'est le Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine comme la Commission. Dans le cadre institutionnel de l'Union, la Commission de l'Union africaine joue le rôle qui a été rappelé tout à l'heure par la vice-présidente, joue le rôle d'organe de coordination et d'administration, facilitant du dialogue et le processus de réforme. Dans les relations avec les États membres, l'autorité de la Cour découle de la volonté souveraine des États membres exprimée par la ratification du protocole. La compétence de la Cour ne s'impose pas, elle est déduite de la volonté des États qui l'expriment conventionnellement à travers leur gouvernement. Outre les interactions des États membres dans le cadre du processus judiciaire, les relations entre la Cour et les États membres se sont fondées sur le partenariat, le dialogue et le respect mutuel. La Cour exerce son rôle et son mandat dans les buts définis par les instruments fondateurs, tout en tenant tout en compte de la diversité des systèmes juridiques en Afrique. En cas de difficulté, la meilleure solution consiste à recourir à des échanges constructifs et à un dialogue institutionnel. Les décisions judiciaires peuvent certes avoir des implications complexes, mais elles sont rendues dans un cadre juridique librement exprimé par les États parties. Le succès de la Cour est indissociable de la confiance et de la coopération constante des États membres. Excellence, distingués invités, mesdames et messieurs. Les résolutions de la Cour ne sont pas le fruit d'un travail isolé. Elles ont été renforcées par une collaboration permanente entre les États membres qui en inscrivent les règles et le travail des influenceurs de la Cour. La fourniture par les États membres des ressources nécessaires, notamment pour le fonctionnement de cette Cour, le soutien administratif et logistique des États, notamment le soutien administratif des États hôtes, la Tanzanie, les initiatives de dialogue judiciaire entre les tribunaux nationaux et les tribunaux régionaux, la coopération statutaire et technique entre les organes et les autres juridictions dans le cadre africain, les échanges avec les acteurs de la profession juridique, les barreaux et les institutions universitaires, les interactions constructives avec les organes, les organisations, les sociétés civiles. Une telle collaboration témoigne d'une reconnaissance commune du fait que la justice continentale, le droit continental, la justice continentale nécessite un travail de partenariat et non pas un travail en vase clos. Mais ce travail, effectivement, expose la Cour la juridiction continentale a quelques défis qui ont été rappelés ici dans les allocutions que nous avons entendues. La Cour a été confrontée à des défis qu'on peut rappeler en quelques mots de la manière suivante. Il y a d'abord le nombre limité des ratifications du protocole qui ont été rappelées, qui est de 34 sur les 55 États que compte la Cour. Il y a un nombre significatif que compte l'Union africaine. Merci, cher doyen. Que compte l'Union africaine. Il y a donc un nombre significatif d'États qui sont encore attendus à la ratification du protocole créant la Cour. Le retrait des déclarations pour la saisine directe de la Cour par les individus et par les ONG. Il y a aussi un autre défi qui est peut-être imperceptible, mais il y a des idées préconçues sur la compétence de la Cour, le manque de... Nous devrions encore sensibiliser sur la connaissance et la perception que l'on doit avoir normalement sur la vie et sur le travail de la Cour, notamment sur les procédures que met en œuvre la Cour. Il y a les contraintes que la Cour connaît du fait des limites de ses ressources, des moyens financiers et matériels dont doit disposer la Cour. Il y a le faible niveau de mise en œuvre des décisions de la Cour. Les faiblesses au niveau de l'exécution, de l'implémentation des décisions prises et rendues par la Cour africaine. C'est là un certain nombre de défis que nous pouvons rappeler ici. Il est nécessaire de renforcer durablement les institutions et de réanimer les engagements communs pris dans le cadre de la Charte africaine et de l'acte constitutif. Chères Excellences, chers distingués, Mesdames et Messieurs, en termes de perspective, nous pouvons dire très rapidement qu'il est nécessaire de faire un bilan et de faire un plaidoyer en faveur du renforcement des mécanismes de suivi, de mise en œuvre de l'activité de la Cour, notamment dans la désignation, et cela a été rappelé aussi, des points focaux pour la Cour et des interactions soutenues avec les mécanismes pertinents des organes déterminants de l'Union africaine, en particulier le sous-comité des représentants permanents sur la démocratie, les droits de l'homme et la bonne gouvernance. Renforcer également le dialogue judiciaire avec les tribunaux nationaux et régionaux. Approfondir la collaboration avec les organes de l'Union africaine, assurer la sensibilisation accrue sur le mandat et les procédures de la Cour, garantir l'accessibilité et l'efficacité des procédures suivies par la Cour. L'avenir de la Cour, on peut en dire un mot, dépend non seulement de sa jurisprudence, cela va sans dire, mais aussi de l'appropriation par les États membres et des décisions que rend la Cour, dans ce que la Cour dit d'être des droits de l'homme et des droits des peuples. L'approfondissement de la ratification et de l'implication des États, nous l'avons dit, et le renforcement des mécanismes qui permettent à la Cour de rendre ses décisions. Excellences, chers distingués et mesdames et messieurs, il faut souligner le fait que la dignité de chaque individu et de tout peuple d'Afrique mérite une protection solide des droits, une protection garantie par les droits et par les instruments déjà adoptés dans le continent en matière de droits de l'homme. La présente cérémonie solennelle marque le lancement officiel de la commémoration du 20e anniversaire de la Cour. Au cours des prochains mois, jusqu'à la fin de l'année, la Cour réalisera une série d'activités en collaboration avec les diverses
parties prenantes. Le dialogue judiciaire avec les organes de l'UA, la promotion et la coopération judiciaire avec les tribunaux nationaux et régionaux. Des campagnes de sensibilisation auront lieu, de recherche et d'information en collaboration avec la société civile et le monde universitaire. Des publications seront faites, des publications thématiques, des événements publics divers seront assurés également par la Cour durant toute cette période. Je veux, pour conclure sur ce point, rappeler qu'un nouveau site officiel, un nouveau site web sera installé par la Cour qui sera consultable. Ce site est appelé Ajudata, qui sera mis en œuvre. En conclusion, on peut dire un mot en se disant qu'il y a 20 ans, la Cour n'était qu'un rêve, une aspiration. Aujourd'hui, elle est devenue un pilier fonctionnel de la gouvernance continentale. Son autorité ne repose pas sur la force, mais sur le droit. Elle ne repose pas sur la hiérarchie, mais plutôt sur la coordination et sur la coopération. Elle ne repose pas non plus sur la rhétorique, mais plutôt sur des décisions raisonnées prises par la Cour. Au moment où nous abordons la rentrée judiciaire 2026, nous réaffirmons notre fidélité à la Charte et à l'indépendance judiciaire et à l'avenir constitutionnel commun du continent de l'Afrique. Je tiens également à témoigner encore une fois notre reconnaissance à son Excellence le président John Dramani Mahama pour nous et qui nous a fait l'honneur de sa présence dans le cadre de cette cérémonie et d'avoir accueilli favorablement l'idée d'être le champion de l'Union africaine en matière de justice et des droits de l'homme. Nos remerciements vont en outre à l'Union africaine et à ses organes pour leur collaboration constante à la Cour. Je remercie enfin tous les participants ici présents et d'avoir répondu à l'invitation de la Cour. Est ainsi venu donc le moment pour moi d'avoir l'honneur solennel d'inviter son Excellence le président John Dramani Mahama pour prononcer son discours liminaire. Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. Kindly resume the seat. Your Lordship, the President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Justice Blaise Chikaya, Your Lordships, the Justices of the African Courts, Your Lordships, the Chief Justices and Heads of International and Regional Courts, distinguished representatives of AU organs and member states, members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs and Eastern Regional Cooperation, representatives of civil society, the legal fraternity, the media, ladies and gentlemen. And let me proceed on the protocols that have been so well established by earlier speakers. I'll begin by extending my gratitude and that of my delegation to President Samia Suluhu and the people of the United Republic of Tanzania for the warm welcome we have enjoyed since our arrival in this beautiful city of Arusha. But before I begin, let me pay my compliments to the Tanzanian police band for your very spirited performance. I've seen performances by police bands, but I must say this is classic. Because normally when you see a solo performance, it is normally with a saxophone. This is the first time I've seen a trombone played with such dexterity, and so I wish to compliment you. I'm going to deliver the keynote address, but it's going to be a short speech, not long, because I was vice president from 2009 until 2012, and my president was the late president of the Republic of Ghana, John Mills, and he was a man of brevity, and he liked to tell a joke which had a tremendous influence on me, and so I don't speak for too long. It was about this conference where people were supposed to speak, and there was one speaker who spoke for so long, more than an hour and a half, and as he spoke, people started leaving the hall and leaving the hall. And so by the time he said in conclusion and was wrapping up his speech, there was only one person left in the hall. So he walked up to him and said, "I thank you very much for showing me such respect and waiting to listen to my entire speech." And he says, "I didn't stay because of respect for you. I stayed because I'm the next speaker after you." And so I'll inflict this very short keynote address on you. I'm truly honored to join you this afternoon for the official opening of the 2026 judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. I'm also to acknowledge that this experience is somewhat daunting. Standing before a panel of judges is admittedly quite intimidating. For many people, this might be their worst nightmare. And perhaps I'm drawing from my own experience, because as a teenager growing up, I often dreamt of my father standing before judges awaiting the decision on his fate. He was detained once and faced the risk twice more, and these fears led to recurring nightmares about him. Honorable judges, I extend my deepest gratitude to you for inviting me to address the court today as your guest of honor at the opening of the judicial year and the launch of the court's 20th anniversary. I'm grateful because this institution and its commemoration hold deep personal significance for me. My connection to these themes is rooted in my family's history, which has shaped my own perspectives on justice and human rights. I've spent much of my life reflecting on justice, due process, and the rule of law. Why are these rights afforded to some and not to others? The same applies to human rights and dignity, which have been on my mind in recent days since I received your invitation. February 24th, last week, was marked another anniversary. It was the 60th year since the 1966 coup d'etat in Ghana that overthrew the government of Ghana's first president, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. My father was a minister of state in Nkrumah's government. Immediately after the coup, he, along with other ministers of state, members of parliament, and other government officials, were asked to report to the police station for their own safety. At the police station, he was interrogated, taken into custody, and he remained in detention for over a year. By 1974, just 8 years later, Ghana, through another coup, was being led by our fifth head of state and third military ruler, Colonel Ike Achampong. At that time, my father had become a private citizen and was working as a rice farmer and agribusinessman with no involvement in politics or government. He was a staunch believer in democracy and he opposed coup making. But he appreciated Colonel Acheampong, whose policies promoted Ghana's self-reliance. He believed that Acheampong had Ghana's best interest at heart. Like many parents, my father and I as well often offer unsolicited advice. It starts with our own children, and eventually we extend this unsolicited advice to friends, to neighbors, to strangers, and in my father's case, even to the head of state. My father decided to write a letter to the head of state, Colonel Acheampong, to let him know that he was doing a wonderful job of leading Ghana. In that letter, he offered, as usual, his unsolicited advice. And he said, and I quote, "But do not hold on to power for too long. Leave when the applause is the loudest," my father wrote. He sent the letter, and soon after, military personnel arrived at our home and took my father into custody for questioning. He was detained for several days on suspicion of subversion. But later, Colonel Acheampong ultimately determined that he posed no real threat and ordered his release. Although I stand before you as a head of state, I remain the child whose father was detained for serving his country and advising its leader. I'm still the little boy who learned how dangerous it can be to challenge those in power, who may act with impunity and assume the role of judges, jury, and executioner over you. And therein lies my belief and respect for the rights and dignity of people. Your Excellencies, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, I share my father's story to illustrate that while he was one individual, his experience demonstrates that no one stands alone. The effects of social injustice and human rights violations extend beyond individuals. They impact entire families and communities. Although our continent comprises 55 sovereign nations, our destinies are closely linked together. Globally, many still view Africa as one single entity and refer to us collectively as Africa. Is it any wonder that they do that? Look at the synergy that existed between us during Africa's era of liberation. One nation after another in quick succession declared freedom from colonial rule. Then again, when coup d'etats became fashionable, that tendency spread like a contagion through nearly every nation. We are each other's keepers. And this is why we need an institution that serves all but is beholden to none, the African Court of Human and People's Rights. Let us now consider the institution that safeguards our values and rights. Over the past 2 decades of its operation, the African Court of Human and People's Rights has proven time and again that it has the fortitude and courage to recalibrate our moral compass. We need that kind of oversight so that we remain observant and respectful of the rights and duties enumerated in the articles of the Banjul Charter, to which all the continent's nations are signatories. That charter complements this court's mission. And so now we must empower the court to be the institution that stands guard over those ideals, protecting and preserving our greatest inheritance. And I'm proud that Ghana has contributed its share of legal minds to this august court over the years. Justice Sophia Akufo served from 2006 to 2014 and rose to the position of President of the Court. She later served as Chief Justice of Ghana from 2017 until her retirement in 2019. Justice Dennis Ajay, a countryman and a respected member of Ghana's Supreme Court, is currently serving a 6-year term following his 2022 election. Africa has been blessed with many of the world's natural resources, including gold, silver, diamond, copper, cobalt, uranium, oil, lithium, and more. At times, it becomes easy to overlook that our most significant inheritance is our people and their cultural heritage. Those who have benefited from our continent for centuries have always understood this powerful truth. And that is why Patrice Lumumba, Eduardo Mondlane, Thomas Sankara, and Amilcar Cabral were assassinated. And that is why the Asantehene Nana Prempeh I and over 150 members of his clan and later Nana Yaa Asantewaa were all banished from the Gold Coast to the Seychelles. Similarly, Omukama Kabalega of Bunyoro in Uganda was also banished to Seychelles. This is why Sam Nujoma was forced into exile from Namibia, and Nelson Mandela was imprisoned on Robben Island, which was a former leper colony off the coast of Cape Town in South Africa. And this is why Steve Biko was murdered in prison. We felt the absence of these individuals and recognized the potential that we lost as a result. What I refer to in my book as the lost decades of Africa was that period from the mid to late 70s until the early 1990s, when the brain drain occurred and the continent stagnated. The median per capita growth of developing African countries at the time was 0.0%. We felt the loss of those who left to seek better opportunities for themselves and their families. These were ordinary people from all walks of life, like architects, doctors, engineers, artists, business people, bankers, and workers in the transportation and hospitality industries. Excellencies, honorable judges, imagine if Africa measured its wealth not by our natural resources, but by our people, valued individuals, free from oppression, conflict, persecution, and violence, and assured of the rights to a life of dignity, liberty, and self-determination. What would that look like? How much differently would we see ourselves? What would that wealth mean for the strength and continued sovereignty of our nations? These are not just questions for a game of what if. They are based on the reality of Africa's near future. These are questions we must ask ourselves as leaders and citizens to determine the nations we are building and the world we wish to create for our children. By 2050, Africa's population will reach 2.5 billion, and more than a quarter of the world's population will be African. By the end of this century, nearly 40% of the world's population will be African. Already the median age of the African continent is 19, compared with nearly 45 in the European Union and 39 in the United States. Can we imagine the power we hold in our hands? Technological advances have made the world feel like a small place. At no other time in our lifetime was that more evident than during the COVID-19 pandemic. By the time the World Health Organization announced the discovery of a new virus in Wuhan, China, that virus was already on an aeroplane to Johannesburg. It was already present in Accra on the roadside as individuals waited for a trotro at the Kwame Nkrumah Circle, or seated towards the rear of a daladala en route to Ngaramtoni. If you look beyond Africa, what you find is that that facade of the so-called global north, a group of countries that have long held themselves up as beacons of democracy and human rights, of liberty, justice, and the rule of law, is fast crumbling. Judiciaries are no longer independent. Citizens and lawful residents are being disappeared by mass law enforcement and then placed without due process indefinitely in detention centers. We see executive overreach and a steady weakening of legislative independence. We see violations of international law. Restrictions are being placed on freedom of speech, assembly, and protest. There's a general loss of liberties and a sharp decline in public trust in governments. Mwalimu Julius K. Nyerere famously said, "One does not judge one's state of health by comparing yourself to a sick person. For far too long, we compared ourselves to the West and used what we believe were their standards as our benchmarks for all our endeavors. The reality we see today should serve as a clear call to action. What should be our paradigm in understanding and interacting with the rest of the world, even as we preserve our dignity and cultural identity as Africans? Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, I call upon African Union member states who have not yet ratified the protocol to please do so without delay. To my colleagues, heads of states in these countries, I assure you that you have nothing to fear from this court. I humbly ask all African nations and individuals to respect and implement the court's judgments in good faith, and to also make the declaration to allow individuals and non-governmental organizations direct access to this court. My father's political tribulations did not end with his detention after he wrote his unsolicited letter advising the head of state. He had to live in exile again for 13 years after another coup d'etat. But many others suffered even greater injustice and abuse of their rights and dignity. Many individuals have endured significant hardship throughout their lives. The Lumumbas, the Modlanis, the Sankaras, the Cabrals, the Prempes, the Yasantues, the Kabalegas, the Nyomas, Mandelas, and Bikos are all recognized as martyrs of the African Revolution. Had the African Court of Human and People's Rights existed earlier in our past, these grave instances of human rights abuses and injustice would have been a very important case for you to adjudicate. We would have secured justice against racist apartheid criminals, colonialists, and even our own oppressive African dictators who tortured and sent many of their countrymen to death, and countrymen and women to death. As I said earlier, all the nations on the African continent are each other's keeper, and I truly believe this. I also believe that each of us is a keeper of the dreams and hopes of our ancestors, hopes and dreams that they could not achieve. We've paved the way for their dreams to be realized, if not by us, then by generations succeeding us. Justice systems in Africa have strengthened over the past decade. In Ghana, we're strengthening our own judicial systems. As I stand and recollect my youth and my fear for my father through my recurring nightmares, I realize that I can put those fears to rest. For the past 20 years, we've had a court that can protect the rights and dignity of African people beyond the borders of our individual nations. So allow me to say, while I'm here in this historic city of Arusha, a city well known as a site where human rights are affirmed and the dignity of African people is protected, that the time for Africa is now. Now is the time for us to meet the challenge of keeping the promise we have made to future generations, promises we have signed and pledged to uphold. Now is the time to deepen our commitments to the courts so that in 20 years from now, when we celebrate its 40th anniversary, it will stand as the leading international judicial body and a model for others. My lords, ladies and gentlemen, now is the time for Africa to step into its greatness. Excellencies, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of all the good citizens of Africa, I wish you a happy 20th anniversary celebration. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Your Excellency, your words reminded that justice is not a static ideal, but a living commitment, one that must be renewed
with every generation. And effective leadership, the vision, and the goal to implement the champion of human and people's rights across our continent. In recognition of the excellence present for this historic occasion, the court will now present you with gifts. I now respectfully invite Honorable Justice Blaise Chikaya, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, to present this gift to His Excellency, our guest of honor.
So there is a commemorative plaque that the President of the Court will present to guests of honor. The plaque symbolizes your distinguished participation in this ceremony. There is a second gift. There is a wooden carving that the President will present to you. We are in the land of the Big Five here, as you have. So this carving depicts the Big Five. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to invite Honorable Justice Chikaya to make the official declaration on the opening of the judicial year and launch of the commemoration and launch of the new website. Thank you.
Par les pouvoirs qui me sont conférés, je déclare officiellement ouverte l'année judiciaire 2026 de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. En cette occasion importante, l'honneur m'échoit également de lancer officiellement la commémoration du 20e anniversaire de la Cour africaine et la plateforme numérique qui va faire honneur, le site web étant conçu pour améliorer l'accessibilité, la transparence et l'engagement de toutes les parties prenantes. Puisse la rentrée judiciaire 2026 être guidée par notre engagement collectif inébranlable en faveur de la justice pour l'Afrique et pour son peuple.
I now invite Honorable Lady Justice Shafika Ben-Saula, Vice President of the Court, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Excellence John Dramani Mahama, Président de la République du Ghana et sa délégation, Honorable Juge Blaise Chikaya, Président de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers invités, tout protocole dûment observé. Je me réjouis profondément de la manière dont nous avons mené cette cérémonie. Les importantes interventions et déclarations de soutien ont mis l'évidence d'abord sur le travail de la Cour, l'évolution de sa jurisprudence et les efforts fournis pour une justice africaine exemplaire sur le continent, sans oublier bien sûr les défis que la Cour tente de surmonter. Le discours de notre invité d'honneur est d'une importance particulière. Il a en effet lancé un vibrant appel aux États membres de l'Union africaine pour un soutien plus important à la Cour. À tous les acteurs concernés, il a demandé un engagement conséquent pour soutenir la Cour dans le combat qui est le nôtre à tous, celui de la protection effective des droits de l'homme sur le continent. C'est le lieu pour moi, au nom de la Cour, de remercier notre invité d'honneur et toute sa délégation pour cette visite inoubliable qui restera sans doute gravée dans les annales de l'histoire de la Cour. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers participants, au nom de la Cour, je voudrais remercier très sincèrement la vice-présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, les chefs de département et toutes les autres personnalités des organes de l'Union africaine, les ambassadeurs accrédités à Addis Abeba et à Dar es Salaam. Je voudrais remercier les présidents des institutions judiciaires régionales et nationales et les membres de leur délégation. Au nom de mes collègues, membres de la Cour, permettez-moi donc d'exprimer à nouveau ma gratitude au gouvernement de la République unie de Tanzanie, aux autorités judiciaires tanzaniennes, aux forces de l'ordre pour leur soutien exemplaire qui a sans doute permis le succès de cette cérémonie. Je voudrais aussi remercier les organes des médias qui ont assuré la couverture médiatique nécessaire au succès de cette cérémonie. Je voudrais aussi ne pas oublier de remercier le président, le juge doyen et tous mes collègues juges pour leurs efforts. Permettez-moi aussi d'exprimer ma gratitude au personnel du greffe de la Cour pour le travail abattu dans la préparation de la cérémonie et pour avoir assuré avec succès le déroulement. Excellences, chers participants, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais terminer en souhaitant qu'après cette cérémonie, quand vous serez de retour dans vos foyers respectifs, que vous n'oubliez pas la Cour et que vous fassiez tout ce qui est en votre capacité pour soutenir ces activités. Je vous souhaite à tous un bon voyage, un bon retour dans vos pays respectifs. C'est sur ces vœux que je déclare close la cérémonie de l'ouverture de l'année judiciaire de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Thank you. The protocol team will now make some quick announcements before we wind up.